Well, hello, I'm Dave Millner, founder and consulting partner at HR Curator, and here is the first of the sessions on the future of leadership, and we're going to focus on the context for change and the new leadership behavioural demands that are likely to emerge. There are three of these videos in this series. As I say, the first one is really looking at the context for change. And really what I'm trying to do is to explore the global mega trends that are evolving and that are impacting on us in the workplace, and trying to share with you some of the information that futurists are outlining in terms of what is going to happen next and what does that mean for us. I think the key for me is that the world will never be this slow again. The world will never be this slow again. So if we're focused on change and people who are possibly not so happy with change, I think it's one of the continual things that we're going to have to get very focused on. I think, as you can see, there are three drivers or disruptors which are really making a big impact here. Obviously, businesses are now susceptible to marketplace changes, financial changes, social media type changes. All of these things are impacting on the businesses, which means that they're having to deal with things so much quicker. The war for talent, that seems to have been around for years. I'm wondering if it's actually really the war for attention. People who are looking for new opportunities, looking for those things that will stretch them and take them into new levels of career opportunity. The thing that's the most interesting for me is probably the third disruption, and that is the experience disruption. And throughout the whole series, I'll be talking about employee experience and the fact that we are really going to have to try and ensure that we focus on the opportunities that the employees are after, while still ensuring that we're driving the performance demands of each and every organisation. It's one of the key dilemmas, and it's certainly going to be one of the massive context for change that leaders are going to have to adopt. If we look at the data, what is that telling us? Well, if we look at Adobe, they did a report recently and they said that 15% of organisations are using artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, however you'd like to phrase it today. And that for 31% of those organisations, it's on the 2018 agenda and beyond. So technology change is coming. It's here already, but it's going to make a big difference upon the way that leaders behave and operate with their employees and with the processes and structures that are in place. PwC did a digital IQ report end of last year, and their feedback was quite interesting and was saying 69% of CEOs feel that it's going to be much harder to gain and keep trust in an increasingly digital world. And I think trust is going to be one of the real fundamental questions and one of the challenges that every leader and line manager is going to have to think about. If we look at Accenture, they did a report and said that 40% is projected productivity improvement from AI type technologies. In the UK, the productivity dilemma has been around for years. It's not saying it's going to answer it, but it's definitely going to be focusing on trying to make an improvement upon those sorts of challenges. And the final piece of information from Sloan was saying that 80% of executives see AI and technology as a business game changer. It's going to change the way we think about things. It's going to change the way in which operations are run within organisations. Now, there are so many futurists around who talk about the future of work, the digital transformations, about disruption, about lean, about agile, about every one of these fads in terms of phraseology that's around today. I've probably read somewhere in the region over the last 2 years about 50 to 60 future of work reports. Through my HR Curator Twitter channel, I'm constantly receiving information, blogs, articles and updates about what people are thinking and saying. And so I've tried to summarise it into hopefully a simple one series of activities and challenges, mega trends, which are definitely coming our way. If we start at the top, I think the critical one is that The overwhelmed employee is a phrase Josh Bersin used a few years ago, and it's really about the fact that information is just everywhere. And one of the critical elements for organisations and therefore for leaders is to ensure that the right information is shared at the right time, and that accessibility to information is transparently available for all the employees across the workforce, wherever they may be, whatever their type of role may be. I've already focused around the disruption and change. It will be the new normal, but change programs I don't think are going to really work in the future. From what I've seen, we're doing some workforce transformation and engagement programs over the last 10 years or so. I think programs, they are important, but it seems to be that it's broken down into a series of bite-sized chunks, into a series of small little projects and experiments and pilots. That seems to be the way that change is trying to focus and adapt. I think the critical thing is about how do we make work personal. People have thousands of employees all over the globe, and they all have different demands. So how are we going to make that work personal? And I think whilst technology doesn't make it a personal experience, it will certainly enable the employee to customize it and make it more consumable in terms of what they want, how they can access things, and how they can use the information. Jobs, well, we all hear that robots are taking all of our jobs away. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as extreme as that, but there will be jobs that will disappear. There will be roles that will evolve and change significantly, and there will be new jobs. But one of the things I'm very certain about, and a lot of the futurists are certain about, is that there will be new skill demands, new priorities on things that will become more and more important. And I'll touch on those during the series. Every organisation will be looking at finding new ways of structuring themselves to try and find that new business model that will not only ensure that they're operationally efficient, but also ensuring that they're providing the best client or customer experience that they possibly can. We then come to the big elephant in the room, the digital transformation. I think it is all about technology, but it's not just about apps. You know, if we're looking to the future, people are already exploring the use of holograms, virtual reality. So technology is going to be moving into a completely different level. I think digital transformation for me is the integration of digital technology into all areas of a business. And that will mean that there will be a fundamental cultural change in how the business operates, in terms of its practices and processes. They're going to change. And the behaviour of the workforce and how they deliver value to customers, that for me embraces everything about digital transformation. And that's why I think it's such an amazing opportunity, not just for organisations to focus on what they're doing, but from an HR perspective, I think it's a huge opportunity to really get at the table and start to really promote and utilise some of the skills and capabilities that I'm not sure are totally used as they should be. The final mega trend is really looking at the fact that analytics and big data, there's been so much noise about it. It's here, but the key is it's going to be driving new decision-making models. And that is the cultural change again, because leaders and managers, we're not saying that your decisions are poor. We're just saying that they could be possibly further enhanced by reflecting and using the data that's available. So if we're then saying the workplace is going to be reimagined, it's going to be changed, what does that look like? And I think that, you know, if we look at the workforce of today, it focuses on three themes around relationships, workplace, and the work. And I think there are a series of things which build upon those trends that I've just talked about. If I look at the relationships, there's going to be lots of communities. People will be all over the place. They may not have a base from which they currently work. They may be what I call locationless. I think the one critical thing is that a phrase that was used a few years ago, the workforce of one, will become very, very important. Every one of us has different motivations, drivers, experiences and capabilities. And the challenge for organisations is how do we tap into those across every employee so that they all feel valued, appreciated and feel that they're going to be giving something back and also receiving something in return from the organisation. Obviously, the leadership practices will now change. And if we now start to look at the workplace, I do believe, I'm sorry I've used a consulting phrase, ambidextrous organisational strategies. Basically what I'm saying is I think the 5-year plan is dead. We can't look 5 years ahead. We can certainly have a vision about where we would like to be, but I think the critical thing for me is that the plan, the strategy is going to be in windows of probably 15 to 18, maybe to 24 months, because the technology is going to be emerging, evolving, and completely changing the way in which we think about our workspaces and the way in which we possibly empower and enable employees to make decisions, which possibly are done by managers at the moment. It leads into the final part of the work, which, as I said, the technology is going to be huge. I think there will be, possibly team descriptions rather than job descriptions. That is certainly something that's being talked about. And I think certainly every employee will probably have an ROI. We're all clamoring to change the performance management process. The dialogue will always remain important, and we must never ever get rid of that. But I think the measurement of performance needs to be much cleverer, and I think that will probably be around, the value that an employee can bring in relationship to the salary and costs that they incur for the organisation. So the impact on the workforce is going to be huge. I think from an employee perspective, there's going to be huge focus on the speed of learning. People are going to have to learn quickly. Empowerment is going to be in place because you're going to be enabled and allowed to make decisions in a different way because technology is providing you with that information in a far easier and a much easier way. Career progression is going to be changing. It's going to be different. I mean, a couple of clients I've worked with have been looking at what we call the Chelsea model. Now, Chelsea, as we know, is a Premier League team who have very successfully a very big and deep youth scheme, and what they have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years is loaning out these stars of tomorrow to other teams for them to basically develop them and help them on their journey. And then they bring them back to the football club, and it would now appear that they either make the team, the first team, or they maybe get transferred on to somewhere else. Some organisations are now trying to identify in their supply chain, in their partnerships that they have, maybe some opportunities that employees can then move into those organisations and work there for a period of time to learn new skills, to provide a different perspective and a different angle. The critical thing as to whether it works or not is HR is going to have to think differently about the progression of the career. We're going to need to think of new and different breakthrough ways of considering how we can take that forward. The work practices, I think we've already touched on, will change with automation. Teams will become more important, and I even think that the empowered team is going to get a renaissance. That seems to be something that came out very much in the 1980s, the empowered team concept, but I think that's definitely going to be a really critical part and in alignment with the technology that's around. And I think if we look at the capabilities of employees, this learning focus is going to be huge, the responsiveness to change and the need to become more tech savvy and to take it on board. So I guess if we come to the end of the first session looking at the impact of these mega trends, I think I'm sort of left with the impression that leaders will undoubtedly be operating in a different world. The world of work is going to change really significantly, and no one is going to be exempt from it. No one is going to miss out from it because the technology is going to be there and accessible for everybody to use. The impact of being a leader is going to be as significant. It's going to be as tough a job as it has ever been. But the key factor is that the context and the way of operating is going to be different. And that means that leaders are truly going to have to change their behavior. It's not talking about it anymore. It's actually doing it, because they're going to have to sustain an experience that really makes employees want to stay in their team at that organization and make it something that's both exciting, stimulating, and yet continues to drive change and engages that workforce as we go forward. Next time, I'm going to be talking about what does tomorrow's leadership look like. So hope you found that interesting and challenging and stimulating, and look forward to hearing that you were able to join me on the next session. Thank you very much.